Hey guys, Sherry Coleman Collins, registered dietitian nutritionist, signing on for a quick Facebook Live here with the Build Up Dietitians. And I have a couple of things going on here and hope you'll bear with me. So one thing is that I am going to try real quick to pull up some of the questions that I got in advance. And then I'll introduce myself as you guys are logging on a little bit more and tell you about my practice. But I want to say, first of all, thanks so much to Leah McGrath and to the Build Up Dietitians team for inviting me to join you guys today. I have a rather flexible job, and so I'm going to try to see if I can make the questions show up so that I can see if you're, oh good, okay, so I know Leah's on. If you're on, give me a hello, a high five, something like that, just so that I know that I can see the questions. Oh good, awesome, okay good. So I'm seeing some commenting, and that's awesome. So that tells me that if you've got questions as we're going along, those will show up. So I am really excited to be doing this. I haven't done a live on Facebook in a while. I used to do them pretty regularly on my page and to promote my podcast, which I'll get to in a minute, but I haven't had the chance to do any in a while. So it's kind of fun to be able to pop on and do this and talk a little bit about my career path as a dietitian. And I invite you to ask any questions that you have as I go along. But just to give you a little bit of background about me, so I also put the link to my Facebook page in the description of this live, so you should be able to click there and then learn a little bit more about me. And you can also go to my web page at southernfriednutrition.com. And so I am in the Atlanta area, and I live in Marietta. So if you know the Atlanta area, Marietta is northwest of the city, and it's a great little suburb that we love, and we've been here almost 10 years. And I have a 5-year-old son and a really wonderful husband and a dog. So that's our family, and I always start with that because for me, that is kind of the most important part of my life. And then everything else I do falls under that as sort of a passion. So as a registered dietitian, I'm a career change dietitian, and I know a lot of people are. Hey Danielle, I know that a lot of people in our profession are also career changes or who had backgrounds in other things before they became a dietitian. So for me, what that looked like was that I worked for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, and I loved that work, and I was in fundraising for them. And I don't know if you know much about cystic fibrosis, but it's a disease that primarily, it's a genetic disease inherited from both parents, and basically affects the lungs and the GI system, where the body creates this thick, sticky mucus that clogs the digestive system and also the lungs and causes a lot of lung infections. And eventually that's the major factor in sort of life shortening. And as I worked with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, I loved the work that I did there, but I'd always had this real passion and interest in food and nutrition as well, sort of at the same time. But I really didn't know that you could have a career in food and nutrition. I just had never met a dietitian. I didn't know about it. It seems to make sense, but it's something I just didn't know about. And so when I was at the Cystic Fibrosis Clinic in the Atlanta area one time, I met the dietitian there, and I learned a lot about how food and nutrition interacts with disease like cystic fibrosis, and how the dietitian is a really important part of managing the disease, preventing, slowing progression, and preventing infection, and treating all these other things, in particular malnutrition. So I just thought that that was incredible and amazing, and I'd always been really a big fan of food and nutrition anyway. But what I learned by meeting that dietitian is that nutrition is powerful when it comes to treating and managing chronic disease, and cystic fibrosis is one example, but of course we know that it extends to all kinds of diseases. Cardiovascular disease and diabetes are easy ones to think about, but also renal disease and kidney disease in all different states, and then other things like other diseases of lifestyle. Certainly food and nutrition can play a huge part in treating those and preventing those. So I fell in love with the idea of becoming a dietitian, and went to meet with the preceptor here in Georgia, at Georgia State University, and she just took one look at me and said, "It is going to take you a really long time to become a dietitian." And she was right. It took me 5 years because I had never finished my undergraduate degree. So I had to go back and take a bunch of math and science and then get my undergrad and then do my internship. And I did the combined program at Georgia State and ended up with my master's and was able to sit for the registration exam right away. But it was 5 great years. I loved it. I learned so much. I met so many great people, and I fell in love with nutrition. And when I graduated, like so many of us, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had lots and lots of interests. And I took my first job in pediatrics. So I worked, when I was an intern and when I was a student, I actually worked at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta at the Eggleston campus, and I was a diet tech, and it was a great way to get started and get some experience and understand sort of the clinical side of nutrition and meet a lot of people. The dietitians there were great mentors for me. They taught me a lot. They were really patient and really kind in teaching me things that I needed to know, and I learned a lot about the ins and outs of diet orders and how nutrition is managed in that clinical setting. So I did that for maybe a year or something like that while I was a student. And then when I graduated, there wasn't an opportunity at Eggleston, but there was an opportunity at Scottish Rite, which was another campus under the umbrella of Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. So I took a job over there, and I worked part-time in the IBD clinic and Crohn's and colitis, part-time in the spina bifida clinic, and then the rest of the time in the hospital as a sort of a hospitalist. So general, whatever needed to be done. Mostly it was GI, but I did a lot of other things because you know how it is when you work in clinical, especially when you're in a hospital, you just do whatever needs to be done. And that is what I did a lot of times. And then after I had been there for a while, I had an opportunity to go into school nutrition. And that was great. I loved school nutrition. And if anybody knows Cindy Canarick-Culver, she was one of my preceptors and now is one of my best friends. She knows everybody, so somebody who's watching this will know who Cindy is. And Cindy was really great when I was in school nutrition during my rotations, and she taught me a lot, and she was also really encouraging, and she always told me if a job comes available that she would recommend me. And so when a job came available, she did, and I came and I interviewed and I took a job in school nutrition. And so I did school nutrition for almost 5 years here in the Atlanta area in Cobb County, which is one of the largest districts in the Atlanta area. I think at the time it was the 3rd largest. We had 109 feeding sites then. I think they might even have a few more now. It was a huge program, and I learned a ton, and I loved that work. I also continued to work PRN for the first year and a half that I took that other full-time job. So I was working full-time in school nutrition and still working PRN in a clinical environment because I loved the clinical work. I loved working in the hospital. I loved working with the families and with the kids, and I really didn't want to give that up. But I did want something that was a little bit more flexible. I was working a lot of hours in the hospital, and you know, to be honest, the pay was much better in school nutrition than it was in the clinical world as well. So I was able to make more money in a different capacity. So for me, you know, the clinical world was this great sort of problem-solving, analytical, hands-on, using nutrition to solve complex medical problems. And the school nutrition world was a place where I could really stretch my legs doing management, managing people, and it was a different kind of problem solving, and I really enjoyed them both. Unfortunately, in my position in Cobb, I didn't get to do a lot of hands-on education with students, but I did a lot of education with my staff. So while I was there, and you know, this is another great thing about wherever you are, but I think in school nutrition it seems to be a little bit more open to this, is just like making the job your own, you know, really being willing and able to go into areas maybe you didn't have a lot of experience in before, and most places in school nutrition that I've been or I've worked with people who are, they get the chance to do different kinds of things, especially creative. Something about working in the K-12 environment, you know, they're very focused on education and creativity, and I think that extends a lot of times to jobs as well. So I was able to do things like wellness for our staff, and I focused a lot on smoking cessation because I had a family member, my grandmother died from COPD, which was really driven by her smoking. So I was really passionate about not smoking and helping people stop smoking. So I was able to focus on that. It's not necessarily nutrition related. It definitely wasn't in my job description, but it was something I was passionate about. The other thing that I got to do a lot of in school nutrition was working with food allergies. I was the only one on staff at the time who had pediatric clinical experience, and so I was kind of given the role of special diets and got to be the lead in our department on that. And that was really a cool experience, and I learned a ton about food allergies and food allergy management, and I already knew a good bit about food allergy management because of my clinical experience when I worked in IBD. A lot of children and people who have digestive issues, whether it's Crohn's or colitis or IBS or other kinds of chronic digestive issues or functional gut issues, have some sort of food allergies. Or intolerances. And so I had already had a lot of experience from the clinical side, but I really didn't have any experience on the food service side. And so working in school nutrition and focusing on food allergies was part of how I really learned a lot of the nuts and bolts of managing food allergies in that environment, which is very challenging, to be honest. There were times when I would have students who would come into the program I was managing who had many food allergies, and their diets were very restricted. And in the school nutrition environment, we tried to meet all of their needs and tried to help them eat a diverse and delicious nutritious diet, but it would be really challenging. Some of the challenges are access, depending on where we were. The kids didn't always have access at home to certain foods, and then if we brought them in for them, they may or may not eat them. There was a limit on the amount of money that we had per student per meal, so we had to be really mindful of managing the dollars. A lot of alternative foods are very expensive. And then obviously there was the concern about making sure our staff was really well trained to prevent cross contact, identify allergies, identify reactions, and then implement any plan that we created. So in our district at the time, I was the person who got to develop that training for our staff, and I created a multidisciplinary committee of people who kind of helped drive that, and worked with one of the nurses in our district, excuse me, the lead nurse, and it was great. It was a great experience. I learned a ton. I really fell in love with food allergies and enjoyed so much being able to help create a framework in our district for helping manage food allergies, especially for families who maybe were really anxious. Food allergies can be really scary if you have, a lot of parents come in and they feel like they have no control, and for the first time they're sending their child to someone else to take care of. Or maybe if they're transferring an older child into the district, they're bringing them in, or they're moving from one school to the other, they're meeting new people, and then all of a sudden, they feel like they don't have any control. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges with food allergies and quality of life and that kind of thing anyway. That's a little bit of a tangent, but I would say, as a dietitian, whatever role we're playing, if we're working with people with food allergies, we have a great opportunity to develop trust with them, to build context, and then to help them understand true risk versus perceived risk. And that gives them a lot of confidence and flexibility. And the more we can educate them to self-advocate, the more confident they can be, and then the better quality of life they have. So in the school nutrition environment, I got to really see that both with the students that I was working with and then with their families as well. Because, if you work in pediatrics, you're never just treating the child, you're also treating the family. And when you're working in school nutrition, you're never just caring for the child, you're also caring for the family, because as my friend Cindy used to say, in school nutrition, we're in charge of the three most important things, their child, which is the most important thing, but also their food and their money. So big things, really important things. And I would say with school nutrition, we're also in charge of their health. So as dietitians who work in the K-12 environment, or who work in clinical, or who work in community, if you're working with families with food allergies, you have a huge responsibility, but you also have a great opportunity to help with their quality of life. And then of course to prevent nutritional deficiencies, which is really important with families who have food allergies and with children. So after I worked in school nutrition for almost 5 years, then I went to work for the National Peanut Board. So I was looking just for something new. I had done school nutrition for almost 5 years. I felt like I had learned what I needed to learn there, and I was always interested in a more public health approach to nutrition and food. And I really do believe that food and nutrition is incredibly powerful. But when we're in a one-on-one situation, sometimes it can be frustrating to feel like maybe you make a difference with that one person, but I wanted to make a bigger difference on a bigger scale, and not to downplay that one-on-one interaction, because I think it's essential. We have to do that. We need to do that. People need us to do that. But I also feel like on a macro scale, having the opportunity to shape people's perceptions around food and teach people about food and nutrition and make a bigger impact was something I felt really passionate about, and I wanted to do it more. And nutrition communications for me is a place to be able to do that. And so when I actually saw a listing for a job with National Peanut Board, listed through the Georgia Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. So another reason to be involved with the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, which I'll get to in a few minutes as I talk about some things that have helped me with my career, is that job board was only accessible for members, and the National Peanut Board was looking to hire a dietitian. So they had put an ad through Gand, and I saw the ad, and I applied for the job. Actually, it's really funny because I saw the listing, and on the listing it said up to 40% travel, and I was relatively newly married, and so I didn't say anything to my husband at first, and then eventually a few days after I saw the listing, I brought it to my husband and said, hey, what do you think about this job? It sounds like something I'd be really interested in, but I'm a little worried about the travel. And my husband looked at it and he said, I think it sounds like a great fit for you. You should go. And what's the worst thing that could happen? You could decide you don't want the job, and you already have a job, so who cares? So he was right, of course. And so I went for the interview, and it was a perfect fit. It was one of those things where, you walk into something and you're like, wow, I feel like my skills are perfect for this job. They were looking for somebody who had some K-12 experience because they had a lot of outreach in that environment. They needed somebody who understood food allergies, because obviously when you're talking about peanuts, people always ask about food allergies. So I needed to be able to answer those questions, and I had that background already. I think, they were looking for someone who was a communicator, and as you can tell, I like to talk. So they really wanted somebody also who loved food, and I love food and nutrition. I love to eat, and I love to cook. So it just felt like the job was built for me. And so I think I interviewed on Thursday or Friday, and then on Monday they offered me the job, and on Wednesday I accepted. And so it was a really fast process, but sometimes when things are the perfect fit, it just happens that way. And so I've been working with the National Peanut Board now for about 7 years, and I love working for America's peanut farmers. So just a little bit about what the National Peanut Board is. It's essentially a checkoff program, and most of you are probably familiar with the National Dairy Council's Got Milk campaign. The people who do that are sort of the same thing as the National Peanut Board. It's a checkoff program for farmers, so it's fully farmer funded. It doesn't get any money from the taxpayers. It does have USDA oversight, so the United States Department of Agriculture oversees the programming that the National Peanut Board does, and the National Peanut Board pays USDA to do that. So it's a great program. It's a promotion board, research and promotion board. So we do a lot of different things at the National Peanut Board to promote USA grown peanuts, and we have a team of about 11 people. So it's a small team, but we do a ton of stuff all over the country and even international. What are some good online or other resources like conferences, webinars for dietitians who want to learn about food allergies? Oh, that's a great question. I'll get to that in just a second. So in my work with the National Peanut Board, part of what I do is food allergy related, and I'll talk more about that in a minute, but I also get to do some other promotional work, so domestic promotion, and then sometimes I do recipe development and those kinds of things. But I mentioned I have a 5-year-old, and so this is an important change, and especially for people who are interested in sort of changing their careers or doing different things. When my son was born, I realized I didn't want to travel as much as I was, and I didn't want to work as much as I was. And you may notice from the background, I'm not in an office. I'm at home today. And so after my son was born, I decided I wanted to go to part-time, and I wanted to work a more flexible schedule and not travel as much. And so the National Peanut Board was kind enough to allow me to stay as a consultant. So now I work for them as a consultant, and they hired another dietitian recently. Her name is Jada Linton, and she is awesome. And she does a lot of the day-to-day work at the National Peanut Board as well, and very specifically focuses in the nutrition world, and I focus on food allergies. So All of that to say, in my work with food allergies, I do a lot of myth dispelling. So there are a lot of myths and misunderstandings about food allergies in the world of nutrition and food. And so where are some good online resources? So I had the very fine privilege in the last few years to write for the Academy the practice paper, which is the role of the registered dietitian nutritionist in food allergy diagnosis and management. And I would say that for the dietitian, that is a great resource. And you don't have to be a member of the Academy to access that document, though I do recommend that you are a member. That document has a great overview of food allergies and understanding food allergies from a practice standpoint. So whether you're in clinical community or food service, that document has great basic information. So if you're just starting especially, or if you need to get your hands around understanding food allergies, that document is what I always tell people to start with. And then I also had the chance with a number of other registered dietitians to create a certificate of training in food allergies for the Academy. So the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics online training, and you also don't have to be a member to access this, but I think you get a discount if you are a member to access this 4-module training on food allergies, certificate of training in food allergies. So those are 2 great resources. I think other things that are really fantastic are Indana, and I better look up real quick the, I'll have to look up the acronym because I can't remember, but Indana stands for the International Network for Diet and Nutrition and Allergy, and it's an international organization of dietitians and nutritionists all over the world who specifically work in food allergies. And it is a great resource for people who want to learn more about food allergies, who are interested in becoming more active in the food allergy space, or who want to learn more about what's happening internationally, because food allergies are a big deal in the United States, but they're really a big deal all over the world. So, and there's amazing research being done by dietitians all over the world in food allergies. And some of the people I think who are incredible in this space are people like Karina Venter, who's a registered dietitian, PhD registered dietitian at Denver Children's, and she's easy to find on Twitter and lots of places, and she is awesome, a great resource, also a great friend. And we actually did a webinar recently for the Academy also called let me think what it was called. It was about prevention. So it was food allergy prevention. And we talked about the recent research on peanuts, early introduction of peanuts and preventing food allergies, which is very, very strong. And now we have new guidelines that encourage early introduction of peanuts. But she talked about diet diversity, maternal diet diversity and early life diet diversity, and how does that impact prevention. So it was a fascinating place. So there are a number of those kinds of webinars out there. I spoke recently at Today's Dietitian Symposium in Arizona about food allergies, and that was amazing, and I got lots of great questions. And I think that, looking for those kinds of things is really helpful. And then Karina, her sort of counterpart with Indana is Marian Groch, who is at Mount Sinai. She's also a food allergy expert and is an incredible clinician, and both of them are very well published in the literature around food allergies. And Marian and Karina and Indana as a group have put together an RD training each year or every 2 years on food allergies. And it's a conference. They take a small number of people. I think less than 100 dietitians get to go to that training every year, but it is a great training. And I got to go this past year and just was very excited to hear so many things, new things and things that I didn't know about what's happening in the literature around food allergies. And the reality is that food allergies is a dynamic area to work in. There's a lot of research that's happening. I mentioned myths and misunderstandings, and I think that's one thing that that I find myself fighting all the time. Is a lot of people don't understand food allergies. They think that adverse reactions are all food allergies, and certainly they are not. Not all food allergies. Not all adverse reactions to foods are food allergies, but the consumer doesn't understand that. And so I think the great thing that a dietitian can do is really provide context and help address myths and misunderstandings so that people know, there's a reason we want to get people diagnosed accurately, which is one of my passions. Misdiagnosing food allergies or overdiagnosing food allergies can lead to food restrictions that lead to malnutrition. And if as dietitians, our goal and our desire is for people to have the best possible health, we should be promoting liberalization of diets, right? We should be promoting a diverse diet that includes all nutritious foods. And if you look at many of the top allergens in the US, the big 8 are milk, eggs, peanuts, tree nuts, fish, soy, shellfish, and wheat. And those are all in and of themselves really nutritious foods that we want people to be eating at all stages of their life. So we want to really be careful about over restricting and getting accurate diagnosis. And so I know that, some of the questions that I get are things like, are food sensitivities and food allergies the same thing? And they're not the same things. And there's even a lot of confusion around the term food sensitivities, because the reality is that even with traditional blood and skin tests, you can be diagnosed, you can have a positive test, but that doesn't mean that you have a food allergy. So positive tests of any type don't necessarily, in and of themselves, without any symptoms, those don't mean that we have a food allergy or any problem with foods. So that's just one example of probably the most common thing that I get asked around food allergies. So let's see, I have a few questions that Leah had sent me in advance. I want to make sure that I get to those. So I talked about resources. What advice would you, what is it like to work for the peanut board, and how is it different from working with a food brand? Oh, that's a great question. So I mentioned already that we have USDA oversight. The other thing I would say is that we're not brand specific. I don't represent any particular brand. At the National Peanut Board, we promote USA peanuts, so all things USA grown peanuts. So any product that contains peanuts grown in the US, we're going to promote. I would never obviously promote things that I don't disagree with or I think are dangerous or a problem for people. I wouldn't promote those, but I think that there's room for all foods. So it's easy for me to talk about my love for, chocolate peanut butter cups as it is for me to talk about peanuts, a handful of peanuts and their protection for cardiovascular disease. I love peanuts. I was a huge peanut fan before I joined the National Peanut Board. So it was a really natural fit for me. Again, going back to that natural fit, it was really easy for me to promote peanuts because I love peanuts. I always have. So I think that in that way it is a little bit different. We also have USDA oversight, so we can't say anything that's not accurate, that's not evidence-based. I love science, and I'm passionate about using the evidence to promote food and nutrition and talk about health. And because we have USDA oversight, we've got a tight lid on what we can and can't say. I can't say anything that isn't backed by science, and usually is very strongly backed by science. I can talk sometimes about emerging science, but USDA is very conservative, and so the things that you'll hear me say on behalf of the National Peanut Board is always going to be something that's very well supported in the evidence by the science. So that's definitely a difference. Food brands don't necessarily have that same level of rigorousness with regard to their claims. Of course, they have FDA oversight, so that, as far as like the claims that they make, the FDA has some say over that. But, food brands sometimes can be a little bit, they can walk the line a little bit on that, as we all know, seeing some of the claims in the supermarket. And then another question that Leah had asked, what advice would you give to young in career, right? Because there are some changers like me, RDs, as far as being involved with dietetics at the state level. Oh, this is a great question. So, and I kind of alluded to that. So I think that, being actively involved in your professional associations is really important. And I have always been involved. When I was a student, before I became a dietitian, I was involved, even at the academy level, I was involved on a student council. So, and I've always been involved, at the district, state, and national level as much as I could. I have learned over the years to maybe do a better job of saying yes and no to things. I have limited amount of time. I mentioned I have a 5-year-old. He's going to kindergarten this fall. I'll have a little bit more time, but before this, as he's been very young, I've had a little bit less time. But before he was born, I was very actively involved. I've been in a number of positions. I've been a delegate at the state level. I was a district was I a district president? I think I was a district president, but I was not a state president. I've done a number of different volunteer things, and I think that the key to being involved is networking. And I think that's a big key in also moving forward in your career and doing the different things that you want to do, and also having flexibility to move between types of roles. You know, I mentioned I've done clinical food service and now nutrition communications. And I think that being involved and having a wide network is really a great way to grow in your career and have the opportunity to do lots of different things, lots of new things. And so I think, you know, that kind of brings me to where I am. And, you know, I'm volunteering with the DPG now. I have a role on the nominating committee for the Dietitians in Business and Communications DPG, and I love that role, and I really like what they do, and I have been involved with the Academy. I'm not as involved right now at the national level beyond the DPG, but I intend to always stay involved, and I always encourage people to do that, because I think the more involved you are, the more you have an opportunity to have an influence and have a voice within our organization. And our profession is so broad that we need more people involved who can share their experience, give their advice, and also help steer this giant ship that we have that's nutrition and dietetics as a profession. So my latest projects are, I have a podcast that I started last year, so we're 2 years in. It's called Southern Fried Girlfriends Podcast, and I do it with a friend named Dee, and it's super fun. It's all about women's health. It's sort of an umbrella term for, you know, mental, spiritual, and physical health, and we talk about all kinds of things from breast cancer to menopause to motherhood, and we talk about a lot of emotional things, because I think that that's such an important part of being healthy, is not just about our physical health, but also about mental health. But we also talk about cooking, and we talk about cancer prevention, and gosh, we talk about a lot of different topics. So check that out if you're interested, if you're a podcast listener. It's a fun passion project. It's not necessarily a moneymaker, and don't ask me about podcasts. I'm no expert. I'm still learning, but it's a lot of fun. We really enjoy doing the show and get great feedback from the people who listen. Yeah, and I'm working on a cookbook, like every dietitian I know. and yeah, that's it. And mostly I'm working on balance and trying to balance, this career that I love with my family and other passions and desires that I have as well. So that's what I do. And yeah, so if you have questions about food allergies, if you want to learn more about food allergies, please ask me. If you have any questions now, you can put those in the question box, and I'll hang for a minute and see what those are. And if I don't get any, thanks. Yeah, so you can find me almost anywhere on social media as either Dietitian Sherry, 2 T's in dietitian, 2 R's in Sherry, or as PeanutRD. So PeanutRD is my National Peanut Board handle. And I have Dietitian Sherry on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and PeanutRD is on Instagram and Twitter. So you can follow me on either of those places, and I would love to connect with you and answer any questions you have and be a resource to you. And I love meeting dietitians. Oh, I didn't even mention that I speak all over the country. So I travel all over the country, and I speak around the country on behalf of the National Peanut Board and sometimes for myself. So this year I gave my very first keynote speech at the Georgia Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, and that was the most exciting presentation I've given to date, because it was really fun to be in my own house with my own people doing the keynote presentation. So that was thrilling. So if you're looking for a speaker, I may be able to help you with that. So I think that's it. If there are no other questions now, and I will keep an eye on the comments on this post, and if you have any other questions that I didn't answer, feel free to post them here. Oh, can you list some resources? Oh yeah. Oh, thank you so much. I think that might be, is that Leah? I don't know if that's Leah, but if it is, thank you. If that's whoever that is who's saying nice things about me, thank you for that. I will definitely put my resources down there, and you can find me on LinkedIn, but I'll tell you I'm not as active on LinkedIn as I am on social media. I should be better, but I'm not always good. So I will put some things in the comments as far as how to find me, and and resources, and if there are any other questions people have, please feel free to reach out, put them in the comments. And it's been great being here. I know this has been a little bit long, so I hope people have the chance to watch it, and I look forward to being connected with all of you on social media, and hopefully meeting you guys in person sometime in the future. I'll be at Fancy. If you're going to be there too, please come say hi. And yeah, I'll look forward to connecting with you guys online and in real life as well. So thanks so much. Thanks again, Leah, for inviting me to come. Talk to you guys soon.